right, so hi everybody. Today I'm going to talk about spreadsheets in QualiWare and their myriad uses. So first I'll just have a little brief intro blurb and then we'll jump right in. So what's a spreadsheet? So spreadsheets in QualiWare allow the user to edit and aggregate collections of data across a repository from one window. In fact, making changes to content on the web has never been easier thanks to the dynamic spreadsheet functionality, which enables direct editing of attribute fields for various QualiWare objects. QualiWare 10 merges the functionality of a spreadsheet with the functionalities of property matrices known to QLM users and administrators. This means that you can not only edit collections of objects and their attributes, but you can also enrich the spreadsheet with extra columns and rows. Where you can add notes, perform calculations, and analyze information. So here we have a spreadsheet example. In this case, oops, loading up, there we go. So we have a spreadsheet example, in this case for corrective actions and their attributes. As you can see, you have access to vast amounts of data for repository objects. Spreadsheets themselves can be standalone, or they can leverage generic queries, which is what this one's doing. And I'll show you what that looks like in QLM a little later. As you can see, the spreadsheet tool borrows some of the aesthetics from and functionality present in Excel spreadsheets. So we have our contextual tabs with the toolbars and the various functionalities. We have a formula bar where we can insert formulas. More to come on this later. We can export a spreadsheet into Excel or PDF quite easily. From the Home tab, it's just the first button on here, Export. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I can export it as an Excel file. Open that up, and here's, oh, is my screen sharing paused? There you go. So this is what it looks like in Excel. I'm going back to my window. Oh, it's not automatically switching back to my active.
No, it's not. No, it isn't.
Huh. All right. Well, we have, so in the Home contextual tab toolbar, on the left, we have our standard cut, copy, paste. We have text and cell formatting options. We can freeze cells and panes and filter. Depending on where you're selected, on the far right of the Home tab contextual toolbar, you have 3 extra buttons. So the first one allows you to open the page for the object referenced in the actively selected cell. So if I were to click on this, then it offers me the option of navigating to that page. I won't do that right now because it's going to take me out of the spreadsheet. The second of these allows you to open the edit dialog for the object itself. So I can make edits to the object directly from the properties window. The third option allows you to make governance status changes for the object in the actively selected cell. Now, some of your spreadsheets that are using generic queries may end up displaying objects that have statuses. And you, out of the box, you have the option of changing the governance status from the spreadsheet itself, but for all intents and purposes, to stick to the rules implemented by the governance workflow engine, please use the governance actions button. All right, so notice in the spreadsheet, there is a sort of gray outlined area with a gray line. This represents the dynamic area in the spreadsheet. So any changes that you make here will be bolded and italicized where you make them until you press save on the spreadsheet, at which point your changes will be fully committed to the repository. So for example, I will change the title and responsible individual for an object directly from the spreadsheet so you can see what that looks like. So let's find one that's in opening status for me. So I can just simply alter it like so. And the responsible I unselect myself, and then I go in here and we will assign Cecile as a responsible. And so as you guys can see, the changes that I've made are italicized and bolded, but they won't be fully committed to the repository until I press the save button. So now those respective objects have been updated. So there's different, within the spreadsheet, there's also different types of fields for the dynamic area. There's drop-down menus, as we've seen here for the status, and there's also fields for text, number, and dates. You can edit those by going into the Data Contextual tab and clicking the Data Validation button. And we can see here the options that we have for the drop-down list, as well as considerations for rejecting the input or showing an error when invalid information is entered. So you can also, within the spreadsheet, just like in Excel, you can also filter and sort the rows on columns using the either the filter button present in the Data Contextual tab or the Home button, in the Home Contextual tab, the filter button. So what I would do is the filter only applies to the selection you make. So I would always, as a best practice, just select the whole diagram and include a filter. And now you can, hide blanks and do whatever you like. And of course, removing the filter is just as easy. Just select everything again and click that filter button. Outside the dynamic area, we are free to populate the spreadsheet as we wish, as mentioned earlier. For instance, we can add some notes for each row object. For instance, this one here, I could say, call this column notes and say tested GWE functionality. And now that's in there. I could also, you can also use many of the functions that are available in Excel for analyzing or manipulating the data. For instance, let's say I wanted to find out the number of unique individuals responsible for all of these corrective action objects. So I would just go, select a cell, just like in Excel, type equals, and we will, we're looking at, so equals, what was it?
Dragos, just while you're doing that, actually,
Yep.
James had a quick question. What version is the spreadsheet demo? What version are you? James, did you want to know what version Dragos is using right now?
Currently, I'm on QualiWare 10.5, but all the functionality that I'm describing today is should be available on 10.4 as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So if I wanted to figure out the number of individuals responsible for all of these corrective actions, I would just do equals count blank, or sorry, count unique, and select my cells. And see here we have eight individuals that are responsible for all of these corrective actions. Of course, this is all dummy data and test data, so none of it has any real effect. And if you can't find the functions that you're interested in from the available list here, because a lot of these seem to be oriented for statistical analysis, you can easily find the full list of functions by looking up the QualiWare Spreadsheet Technical Guide on the web. And in fact, I will just include a link to it in the chat here for your convenience. In terms of the formulas themselves, it tells you what the formulas do, but it doesn't tell you what the format for those should be. Although in my experience, I've gone up and looked up what the equivalent function is, the same name function in Excel. And it seems that the input formatting for those works the same as it does in Excel. So if you can't find what you need from that, you could also go ahead and make your own formulas. I'm going to take you to an example where I created my own. So So here we have a business process network object, and notice the business processes tab here, HTML content tab. Can anybody tell me what that points to? Any ideas?
Spreadsheet.
Correct, that's right. Takes us to a spreadsheet.
Was that a planted question?
Yes. No, actually, that wasn't a planted question. So let me just quickly, before we go any further into this, let me just take you over to QualiWare, to QLM, and show you how the spreadsheet is set up. So right now we're looking at a business process network object. We're in the business process HTML content tab. Keep that in mind. I'm going to switch up my screen over to QualiWare. Open up the HTML publisher. And we'll go down to our template definition. So business process network. And here in the properties for the template definition, we're going to go to the center tab. And here we have all our HTML content tabs. So the one we're interested in is the business process properties. And so I've opened that up. And as you can see here, embedded into that is a spreadsheet object called business process properties. And if we go into that spreadsheet object, we can find that it's linked to a generic query, as I had mentioned before. And if you go into the generic query, you'll see that you'll see how it's built, and you see what the sort of scope of the spreadsheet is in this concerns field here. So if I were to visit the spreadsheet without it being embedded, so if I were to visit the spreadsheet template definition on the web, it would show me, it would show me the business processes for Chixie car rental processes. But if I have it in an HTML content tab for the relevant template, then this concerns field will be changed dynamically according to what you're looking at. So that's what's going on here on the web. Let me just switch back to the web. All right, so going back to the web, here are some examples of some custom formulas. So these ones here in the sort of gray outlined area are out of the box examples. So what it's doing is it's pulling, so you see it has two spreadsheet tabs here. It's pulling the information from the first tab, which is built on the generic query, and manipulating it. So one example is the number of processes. And as you can see here, you're using the count A, which is also a function in Excel. And it's referencing the attribute name within the generic query. So you have the option of using that as well. Or you could reference, as it's shown here, you could reference columns or cells in in the other tab. So this one multiplies the number of columns by the number of rows and gives you 55, which is the total number of cells there that you could fill in with information. And then this one counts the amount of blank cells and gives you a percentage of completion. So that's the out of the box sort of functions. Here's some extra stuff that I've added. So one from my earlier example, where I wanted to find the number of unique owners. So it's using count unique. And these two are using the same formula to find the number of information systems and capabilities used. Now for the IT systems helping deliver capabilities section here, I wanted to show what IT systems are used in this BPN and what capabilities they help fulfill. So this was built from a composite of various formulas located adjacent to the dynamic field in the main spreadsheet tab, and I'm going to tell you in a second why this is actually not best practice in context of spreadsheets that are embedded in HTML content tabs, because as you're navigating, as you're looking at different business process networks, for instance, that have this business process spreadsheet, these rows naturally will change based on the contained objects within that diagram. And what that results in is if you're including some custom stuff here, so now I'm outside the dynamic area, I'm in the static area, which is below and beside the dynamic area. When that information changes as you're switching spreadsheet, or as you're switching business process network, for instance, you may end up losing some of these fields, and then whatever functionality you've built into here won't do that. well, you may experience some data loss. So as I'd mentioned, that this field right here is a composite of various functions. So it says what IT systems deliver which capabilities. Of course, taking into consideration the fact that the spreadsheet actually has a couple of information systems that are responsible for delivering, or sorry, the same information system that's responsible for delivering multiple capabilities. So I wanted to take that into account. So I wanted to find the amount of instances of a specific information system. I gave it a label so that I could then order it. I identified the unique ones, and then I replaced the deliver capability field here because we're going to be using a VLOOKUP. I've also indexed these so that, see here where there's a blank field because the Chixie beacon was already mentioned or accounted for in this row. This index will ensure that they come out here with no blanks so that we can easily refer to them in the tab here. But for future reference, if you're ever planning to play with the information in a spreadsheet that's using a generic query and that spreadsheet is tied to an HTML content tab, likely the content on the spreadsheet itself will change. And so be very careful where you're placing your formulaic compositions. I would, as a best practice, I would just include it in another tab here. So I would just reference something in this tab, for instance. Right. So by the way, since we're talking about capabilities, there are also other ways to see what delivers these in context of spreadsheets. If you look at, for instance, a business capability model object, it has a tab with spreadsheets. So let's go check that out. So here's a business capability object, and delivered by tab contains actually not one but 4 individual spreadsheets. And the way that this is structured in QLM versus what I had shown you earlier is simply that there's another layer of HTML content tab. So there's an HTML content tab called delivered by, and then there's 4 subsequent embedded HTML content tabs that then contain the spreadsheets that then refer to the generic queries. So here we can see so these spreadsheets show the relationships between capability and whatever applications, processes, initiatives, or information systems would deliver these. So this is another kind of this is similar to a link matrix in QLM, where I can define the relationship. If I feel that manage asset, if I feel that general ground handling is fulfilling the manage assets capability, or vice versa, I can simply check this off and save my spreadsheet. Right. So what else here? So we've seen a few different uses for spreadsheets so far. Here's another big one, bringing information into QualiWare. And we're going to do this using CSVs. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new spreadsheet. And call this demo. Okay. So I'm going to OK on this. And then I'm going to navigate to my spreadsheet. Here we are. So from the spreadsheet, we will import a CSV. And the way we do this is we access the data contextual tab. And the last button here called load file content into spreadsheet, we can upload CSVs with information. So let's do that right now. So I'm going to import some dummy data. And here in the dummy data, we have our business process or activity name in this case, because well, you'll see it in a second what diagrams we're working with. The description for the activity, the owner of that activity, and some irrelevant information here in case you're concerned about having some data that you don't know what to do with. That's fine as well. So now that I've got my dummy sort of data in here, we can see that we have now three, not one, but three spreadsheet tabs. The first one contains the content, and I'm gonna refresh this. Seems to have bugged out on me. So the first tab contains the content that I uploaded using the CSV. The second tab is pertains to mapping rules for those fields. So we're going to be defining what goes into which template, into what attribute. Are there any linkages, stuff like that. And then the last tab is for is concerning the diagram this is going to go into, because you're not just importing the data. This is meant for importing data into a diagram. So we're going to be using a business process diagram, which uses activities. And so let's do some mapping here. So for the activity name, I'm going to say reuse object, because if I have multiple entries for an activity, for the same activity with the same name, and I don't want that to be created redundantly within the repository, I have to use this. I have to use this option, reuse object. So we're going to map this to an activity, and this is going to be the name. Formatting's fine. Show on diagram, yes. And action. Here in the actions, this is very important. So here's where we designate what is a primary item, or what would be sort of the thing to link anything else to within the diagram, and that would appear front and center on the diagram. So I'd select this create as primary item. For the description, we don't need to specify the template again. We just go for short description. Show on diagram, yes. And here in the action, we are going to set that as a attribute value for the primary item. So this is why we don't need the template to be specified again here. And now for the owner, again, we're going to do reuse object, because if I go back into my content tab here, let me just, there you go. So if I go back into my content tab, we can see that the owner, there are just 3 owners that are being that are responsible for these sort of 10 activities. So again, we're going to reuse the object. We're going to map this to a position. And before I go map to attribute, we need to look at the actions, because if it's a secondary item, this map to attribute will be the attribute that is connecting it to the activity. So if I say create as a secondary item and link from the primary item, now it's going to consider this is the primary object and this is a secondary object. So the map to attribute, in this case, will have to be something like has responsible or owned by, something like that, right? That links, that there's either a forward or a backward relation field. And of course, the irrelevant information we do nothing with. Go into our options, make sure we're outputting these objects to the right diagram type. Everything's fine. So then I'm going to go into the data tab and output these objects to, or convert to a model, as the button says here. Okay, it's telling me to save first. So there we go. Now that we've saved, we can map these objects to a model. And now it's building that diagram.
It'd be nice if I could borrow you for a few days.
That
It's a
can be
very
arranged.
complicated.
That can be arranged, Carol.
Right.
Just
I
give me a
know it.
call.
It's just I'm so poor these days. Oh.
Carol, we also do financing, just so you know.
Oh my goodness. It's just I've been trying to like we basically deal with many stakeholder models on our projects. Like sometimes we have 50 people involved. And I said to myself, it would be nice to create a diagram in QualiWare that would show us our internal stakeholders, external ones, all the different domain stakeholders. So I thought, maybe I should just create myself a CSV file with all the roles and the themes, the actors, and then use a generic table interface and bring that over to QualiWare. But I think because I wasn't sure if a stakeholder model is available to draw onto the web. So this is where I'm at right now, is I'm trying to get something that I can create an automatic diagram that shows me the stakeholder model that I deal with each of our projects. So I know generic table interface is old school, but it's very powerful and it works pretty good, I think. Would you suggest that I use a spreadsheet instead in the web, the way you just showed, or?
As long as the object, so as long as you're using objects that are directly available to use in so when you're in QLM, you have your symbols panel on the right. As long as you're referencing objects that are directly pertinent to the diagram that you're trying to populate with objects from a CSV, then it's totally fine. And as long as it's within a context of populating a diagram.
Yeah, and the other thing is a lot of this information comes from a business case. And these documents are Word, they're like 100 pages long. And what we do is we bring this 100-page long document into a diagram in QualiWare. We're using the layered viewpoint with Archimate symbols.
Right.
But I would have liked to be able to bring in a lot of that info automatically, I was thinking using the generic table interface. Right. Because I don't think the layered viewpoint is going to be available on the web. We did some customization to it, and I don't think it's going to work. So that's why I'm looking at the generic table interface. But,
Kevin is actually replying because I think his audio is not working again. He says you can do this in QLM. He said you can do this in QLM with a GTI as well.
Correct, and then you don't need a diagram.
Exactly. And then what, sorry?
And then you don't need a diagram to map those objects, so you can just import the objects. But yeah, like you said, it is a little more old school. It seems that it seems that we bugged out here, and it's refusing to build the diagram. But that's okay. The objects themselves should actually be in the repository. If I were to maybe I guess I'll have to force close this because it's not going back either. Okay, 1 second.
I saw that in 10.4.2 as well. I was kind of hoping you'd not see this in 10.5.
No.
And of course,
we're gonna have to go to 10.6.
Oh no. Okay. Well, it seems that now it's going through a very long login process. This might take a few minutes. I don't know if you guys want to stick around for that, just to see the objects in the repository. But okay, there you go.
Okay. Kevin is commiserating. He says, "Don't you love demos?"
Yes.
Nevertheless, this is a very strong feature. This is the GTI 2.0, basically. It's going to upload the information, and it's going to also build a diagram for you. I usually recommend using that. Actually, open the GTI, know what kind of attributes you want to load with what kind of properties and etc., and then copy and paste it into the Excel sheet. Because what Dragos showed you, as far as mapping the attributes, there's only a couple of them available by default with hints and some sort of a help as far as the QualiWare Excel sheet goes, spreadsheet goes, and then for the rest you gotta input it manually. So having the GTI opened, you can copy and paste the information easily. So that would be my recommendation.
There you go. So as you guys can see there, we do have the dummy activity objects imported, and they are linked to the owner, and the description is populated as it showed in the CSV. We also have these these extra 4, 5, 6, and 7. Those are from earlier experiments of mine. Disregard those, but yes. So the objects are in there. It's just the diagram itself. So we used a.
Phil, you had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I guess I think that would be nice if we could do it, but for a non-diagram object, right? I mean, you might have a bunch of business rule or a bunch of, I don't know, category. That's a good example that you would want to import without necessarily wanting to have them on the diagram. So does that mean that you cannot import objects that don't belong to a diagram? Or is there a way to do it anyways?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
So I would say do the import and then delete the diagram afterwards.
Yeah, but yeah, sure, I guess.
Yeah, I see what you mean, Phil. There are some non-graphical templates and properties, right? So you want to just upload them. Yeah, we haven't tried. I haven't tried it. I don't know, Dragos, you have tried uploading any non-graphical templates into the spreadsheet.
I tried with a person object, and it didn't. It created the person object, but it didn't create the linkages. So that points to what I was saying earlier, that you need to have stuff that's directly relevant to that diagram in there. Otherwise, it's hit and miss. Like the position objects that I created, they're not actually a symbol that's available in the diagram, although you can link objects in the diagram to position objects. So that one worked for me, but person objects for some reason did not.
And the other thing I wanted to say is you showed your generic query and you had a diagram in the concern field. The way I see the concern field is more for your testing purposes. If you want to see what the generic query would output in terms of data, then you put an object there, then it will grab the information in the diagram. Because if you looked at your query, you had a filter that looked at the object ID, and it will the last line, whereas this object ID equals QNM ID. That's where it goes. It grabs the object that the focus is on. So when you were on your business process diagram, that's the object ID that it's looking at. So when you change tab to go to your spreadsheet, it's taking that diagram object ID to do the query instead of taking that concern object. So if you switch that business process, it will still give you the proper business process versus what's in that field. So this is really for preview the query, and it's also very useful when you do reports. If you want to preview your reports within QLM, if you have nothing there, then that you probably won't preview your report correctly. I do have one question regarding the spreadsheet though.
Yep.
Is you might have a query like this one that will output one line and then it's the object name and one object that's in the multi-link field with its link value. Then another line is that same object with the second object in the multi-link field with the other link value. I don't know if you're following me. So it's
so
one line.
You're setting up multiple you're saying related to this object, which is related to such and such attribute.
No, it's when you have an activity, you have the resource multi-link field,
That's right.
and you can put attributes in the link field.
Yep.
Right. So if you want to extract that information about those link value, you need to do a generic query, and in that generic query, you'll be able to extract those value, and then it's going to be one line for each of the item in your multi-link field. When you view that in a spreadsheet,
yep,
the end result is you have it's as if it merged the cell on the first one, the name. So you have one activity with span over 3 or 4 or whatever number of resource, and then the link value. So my question is it possible to have it not to merge the first cell?
No,
It merged similar content together.
Yeah,
and if you want to extract that into Excel and then import it into a database afterward or something on another system, whatever, then you have to replicate those merged cells so that it's readable on the other side.
Yeah, I personally haven't experimented that far, so I don't know whether how we could get it to behave to split those cells. Yeah, I don't know. Anybody has any input?
And I know I said last question, but I got another one. In that spreadsheet, you showed that you can have a drop down with the list of value that is available to choose from. I'm not talking about the governance stuff, but other choice field, let's say, or with choice or whatever. In QLM, you can set up so that the choice that you are presented with are based on value of something else.
Based on values in the filter, in the query filter tab, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, I mean, you can have QCL code that will give you a list of value.
Right.
Or you could have, if you have a single link field that linked to a person object, you can have it so that only person objects starting with a P will show up as a choice. So can you add those filter like on your originated by field or responsible in QLM? You can say, well, you know what?
Well,
on that type of object,
yeah,
you add a filter on this one, so it shows you only people's name starting with a D.
Yeah, so that so I think I know what you're talking about. That is for now just configurable within QLM. There's not much for the data validation, especially for multi-link stuff and single link.
So do we still have someone from QualiWare?
Yeah.
We can take that up. We can take that offline, Phil, and investigate it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Anything else, Dragos?
No, that was it. That's all I had. So in summary, we went over spreadsheets at a high level. We saw spreadsheets powered by generic queries. We updated repository objects from spreadsheet dynamic content. We made static content with formulas. We saw spreadsheets in action inside the template definition tabs and how those are set up. And we also imported some content into QualiWare using spreadsheets. That's all I had.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.